All right. So we're going to begin to get to our first panel now. We are about to get to our first panel, and I believe I'm not the one that's going to be introducing this one. I don't think. Or I believe, what do we got here?
Yeah,
We got,
you're introducing Nita.
oh, all right. Okay. All right. Nita Watson, my dear friend. And, you know, I don't know. I guess we're just beginning to build layers. You are an advocate. You are, we have so much in common. We share a mission to change the world, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and bring healing about in so many ways. You are an inspiration, and I am so pleased to be working with you with the prison outreach and your reentry program and the work that we're doing right now with Craig Cecil just getting out. And we have so many people that have reached out to me most recently and said, what do we do now? And I believe that now is when the big work is going to begin. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Nita Watson to this event.
Thank you, Joe. How's everybody doing today? Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Walk for Change Virtual Town Hall Social Justice Panel. Again, my name is Nita Watson. I am the CEO of Free Indeed Reentry Project based in Los Angeles, California, and I am your moderator for today's discussion. But first, I'd like to introduce and welcome our very distinguished guest, Dr. Joseph H. Beasley, a human rights activist, is the board chair and founder of the Beasley Foundation, the Joe Beasley Foundation. He's a human rights activist who was born to sharecroppers on a rural plantation in Inman, Georgia on December 27, 1936. He's been at this a long time. Mr. Beasley received his primary education in a segregated one-room schoolhouse before moving with his family to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he excelled in the local public school system. It was during this phase of his life that he began to set high expectations and committed himself to a life of service. Detective Debbie Ramsey, Baltimore PD, retired. She began her law enforcement career in 1982 with the Baltimore PD in Maryland, where she served for 12 years. She rose through the ranks and became a community policing officer, a patrol officer, and detective. As a detective, she worked with the Criminal Investigation Division, Drug Enforcement Section, and the Internal Investigation Division. She served on several federal task forces alongside the FBI, Maryland State Police, the DEA, and U.S. Marshal Service. Ashley N. Baker, ABA Criminal Justice Reform Chair. Ms. Baker is Delegate of Communications, Publications, and Outreach for the ABA Law Student Division. She's also a 2L at Southern University Law Center, where she holds memberships with the Journal of Race, Gender, and Poverty, the Board of Student Advisors, and the Public Defender newspaper. Welcome to every panelist on today's segment. Now, the discussion. It is apparent that we are fighting the same battles we've been fighting for generations. We also need to know that whatever we're doing wrong in our fight for social justice, we need to make those adjustments. We need education, answers, but more importantly, we need solutions. So let's talk about where we've been, a little bit about where we are, and a little about where we'd like to go. I'll start with you, Dr. Beasley. Give
Well,
our
thank you.
viewers, good afternoon, give our viewers a little history uh, about where we've been and your thoughts on how we as Blacks in America got there or got here, and then some of the root causes that are keeping us here.
Well, thank you very kindly. As you suggest, I've been around quite a while. One of our failings, I believe, is that we've not gone back far enough to kind of examine that put us at such disadvantage as African Americans. And I think if we don't take the time to go back and to look at what put us behind,
Yeah.
then we'll never come up with a reasonable answer. Now, we endured almost 5 centuries of the slave trade. And then after 246 years, actually here in the United States, as servants, as slaves. And of course, when the emancipation came, there was no compensation. So you find yourself in the capitalistic system without access to legal capital. Then, of course, we have another 100 years of plus of sharecropping, where we endured, the torture and terror of the KKK. And, so I think if we don't take the time to go back and look at those things, because there was some critical decisions made.
You have reached 404-391-8047. Please leave a detailed message after the tone, and your call will be returned as soon as possible.
Hello, this is Debbie Ramsey. I'm not able to hear what's being said.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Beasley.
I don't understand, what someone's cut in.
It sounds like Detective Ramsey can hear. I mean, we can hear her, but she can't hear us. So they'll get that together. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so I was just suggesting that with this kind of a background, I believe if we're going to get any sense of parity and a better system, we've got to go back and make adjustments. Because some of the historical decisions was made outside of our purview. So I think for us to all of a sudden now saying, let's go from here. No, we've got to get some things fundamentally straight. If we don't deal with here in Atlanta, we've got the largest inequity in the country as far as income is concerned. And you can't survive with any dignity living in a capitalistic system without capital. I was just looking, we were the commodity that was traded on the big board. A lot of people got rich off of trading us as human commodities. So I think we don't begin to take all of that into account, we'll never understand how we can have a gentleman in Minnesota put his knee on a young man's neck and until he's dead, because they simply don't see us. The larger society don't see us, but we have an equal right to be here, just as anybody else.
So true. So Dr. Beasley, briefly yesterday on our touch base call, we talked about equity and reparations. We need repair from all those things that got us here. Psychological, mental, physical, and economic repair. We need restorative justice, prison and police reform, and political power, which we have been basically shut out of. And those are just some of the areas that we need solutions.
Well,
The issues that we're facing. So, and we're currently marching in the streets for all of this. So tell us your thoughts on this.
well, may I suggest, when we was first emancipated, General Sherman, on behalf of President Lincoln, met with 20 African-American ministers in Savannah, Georgia. And to the man, they said that they wanted that new country because of the long-standing animosity between the races. And of course, of land, we had in our country 400,000 acres of land that ran from Charleston, South Carolina, all the Barrier Islands down to Florida, and then measuring from the Atlantic Ocean 30 miles inland. That was a country for the formerly enslaved Africans. But of course, when Lincoln was killed, Mr. Andrew Johnson, came in as president, and he nullified Phil Order 15, which most people don't even know anything about. And but I think what Mr. Johnson did was not legal. So I'm having people look right now from a legal point of view to see if we have any standings in the courts. I know it's been a long time, but
Yeah.
this whole question about reparations, and people say, well, we don't know what that looked like. But if we look at all the Barrier Islands from South Carolina to Florida, and then from the Atlantic Ocean, 30 miles inland, let's see what is in that space now. That will give some idea of what we're owed.
Mhm.
Of course, Savannah, Georgia's in there, Charleston, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, just kind of on and on. So it's
Yeah.
a mind-boggling number.
Hmm.
So there has to be some kind of repair, because I think if we don't do something, there's going to eventually be some bounce back, and we won't sit idly by or we have another Tulsa, Oklahoma. We kind of guarantee you that. But so, as Dr. King had suggested, one of his lot of books is Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos Society, a chaos, a community. And I would suggest that that's a question we need to answer right now, honestly.
Yeah.
Because if we don't go to community, we certainly go into chaos.
Absolutely. And so what is
I
your,
can't hear you now.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Hello?
Unfortunately, I can't hear.
Can everybody else hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Beasley? Can you hear me now?
It's completely muted. Okay, let me see.
Okay, can you hear me now? It looks like you're unmuted now.
Okay, maybe, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I don't know what transpired during
That's
the
okay.
time.
This is digital, so it goes in and out sometimes. But listen, so we understand what the big picture is on what we need to be repaired on. So are there any, what are your thoughts on what we need to do differently, if anything, in our fight for social justice?
Well, one of the things that I would suggest, we live in a global world, and that was not our choice, because the first globalization occurred when the Africans was dispersed out of Africa across the Americas. And so that was the first globalization. We're in the second globalization now. And as we are faced with coronavirus, I'm looking closely at Brazil and places like Colombia, where, Brazil, of course, is over 50% African. And like in Colombia, it's 26% African. I believe we have to reach out and embrace, not only those of us that's living in the diaspora, but then also those that's living on the continent, because of the same people that put us at a deficit went back in 1884, 1885, and actually drew out a map of Africa, and then really went in and enslaved Africa, and robbed them not only of the human resource, but also the mineral resources and so forth. So quite frankly, I hate to say it this way, but you know, Europe is kind of like a leech, been leeching off Africa for almost 5 centuries. So it's time for us to kind of come clean and see who the debtors are and who the, you know. So I just hope that we would have the courage to
Yeah,
start telling the truth about our history.
right. Absolutely. Now, you provided a letter that you had written to the Pope, I believe, called Joe's Letter of Concerns for the Sake of Our Children. Can you elaborate on that letter and what
Well,
caused
I think
you?
the letter that you received, there was a letter I wrote to some of the leaders locally.
Oh, I see.
I wrote a letter to Pope Francis probably well over 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and I've not received a response. Now, I've been to the Vatican on 2 occasions, and I met with the so-called number 2 at the Vatican. That's probably been 5 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago. But we're not going to stop till we get an answer, because therein, I think, lies much of the problem. I spent a lot of time in Haiti, for an example, and when Columbus landed in Haiti, he gave an eighth of the island to the Vatican, which they have in that portfolio up until today. And I had, at that time when the earthquake occurred, we again appealed to the Pope to give back the land that was given the Vatican by Columbus, because it was not his to give in the first place. And of course, they didn't respond to that either. So there are some decisions that have been made in high places that has put many of us at a tremendous disadvantage.
Yes.
And as you know, as I suggested in the paper, the doctrine of discovery, which we talked a little bit about, found its way into the U.S. Constitution in 1823. And it was really what was used to put our Native brothers and sisters on the reservation where they are right now. And then, of course, up until what's going on presently, because the Native people are struggling over water rights. And, you know, they're using the doctrine of discovery to continue the pipeline through the water source there in North and South Dakota. So we can't say it's a dated document. It is not.
Wow. Wow. Very, very interesting. And I think, education is so critical because we don't even understand as a people how deep the roots go for the oppressive laws that have been put in place to basically shut us out of economic power and political power. So, absolutely, we need to educate ourselves and others. This information cannot just stay within our own, um, discussions or whatever. But we have to take this away with us and spread this news because it's so critical for us to know where to begin for repair and what needs to be repaired, what actually needs to be repaired.
And I think if we would tell the truth to our young people, to give them some sense of self-esteem, that maybe they wasn't the one that messed up. Maybe rather than living in a dysfunctional community, maybe we live in a dysfunctional world.
Right, right. So instead of being so critical about the ills in our community, try to have a better way of explaining why we're the way we are or why things are the way they are. So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else you want to add, Dr. Beasley?
Well, at 83, I'm still full of optimism.
Mhm.
I'm traveling all over the world, really. I'm traveling about as much as I'm here. So I do have the sense that, and even now, with all of the protests that's going, I just had one go by my house a few minutes ago. With
Mhm.
all the protests that's going on across the world,
Yeah.
as many white people as dissatisfied and other minorities are they African. So that gives me some sense that, you know, if we knew better, we would do better.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why education is so critical.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for the historical points that you've made because, as I stated on our call, we definitely are going to continue to do research and we're going to join the letter writing campaigns and things of that nature with real information, real data, and real statistics. And so that makes our fight even more, more
Well, it's
vicious, if you will.
irrefutable. It's not Joe Beasley's idea. It's irrefutable proof and
Yes,
evidence. And
yes,
now that we live in the age of information, just go to Google, and it's not a fairy tale that we're trying to make up.
right. But there are so many things that you raised that, I had no clue that those things were even in place. I had an idea of some, but then there's so much more that we don't know. And so we appreciate your input, your service, and your fight. And we look forward to working closely with you in this fight. And
Well, thank
so
you
with
very
that, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to move ahead. And Detective Debbie Ramsey is with us this afternoon. Uh, Detective Ramsey.
Yes, I'm here. Hi,
Okay. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us. Listen, you are the director of United Efforts Incorporated. And
Unified.
okay, unified. And so it looks to me like there's a lot of youth involved in this organization.
Yeah,
So can you tell us a little bit more about the organization and the work that you're doing as an agent for change in our community?
sure. I will have to start out with first and foremost that for me, it is a love of community. That's what I springboard off of.
Yeah.
And as a former Baltimore City police detective, I had that same type of compassion and felt that I could provide the type of service for a community, whether I was in uniform or out of uniform. After I left the police department, I stayed connected with the community because I'm part of the community. I'm a Baltimore native. And about 5 years ago, right before our 2015 uprising, uh, I decided to go into West Baltimore's Penn North community to see if they would be interested in having an out of school time program for children, well meaningful, well structured, give them opportunities to create and to showcase what Baltimore's youth really is, as opposed to what is depicted um, over popular media. So Unified Efforts is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Our mission statement is to reduce summer learning loss. We've been in that community for 5 consecutive years, and this year is very challenging, and we plan to return. That particular community has been underserved, underinvested, and overlooked, without a doubt. And if people recall the 2015 uprising, you can visualize what that community looks like, and it has not changed that much. So with our program, we understand the population that we're serving and not to insult them. So if I could not go in without providing no cost to the parents, I would not do it. So as for 5 consecutive years, we provide safe, well-structured, well-meaningful out of school time programs for a community. And every year we have grown in size. A couple of years ago, we decided to buy vacant lots in that community because the community asked us to stay and they trust us. Uh, this is where we are today. So in a nutshell, I can talk about unified efforts all day long because I'm talking about young people
Right.
and what they, but I encourage people to go to unifiedefforts.org and hear from our kids. They can speak better about that program than I can. I'm an action person, so I'm not one who paint broad pictures. I like for people to actually see and hear and use all your senses to determine what it is that we do. So I encourage everybody to go to unifiedefforts.org. And if you'd like to support us, we appreciate that because we're trying to build a brand new center. We have run out of all the community space in Penn North. We've been like nomads. Every year we're at a different location, and this community deserves better than that. So this is why we invested in that community by buying the property. We own it outright. because this is what the community, and if you are listening to what the community is saying that they need and not turn a deaf ear, so much more progress can be made, particularly with the children. If you listen to children, children will guide us. I read somewhere, and a child shall lead us. Okay, they're going to lead us to the light, number one, because they're closer to the light than we are. We're pretty much, we get somewhat jaded along the way. But if you listen to young people, they're closer to truth and the light. And I think that is a fixed law of that's like the law of gravity, physics. So that's where we are. As a former police officer, um, how can I say this? When I joined the Baltimore Police Department, it was a two-way street. I knew full well I was entering into a white male dominated profession, no doubt.
No
But
doubt.
that goes both ways. They also knew they were getting a black woman who was someone's mother, someone's sister, someone's aunt, so I had all of those qualities that I brought to the table, and I was able to police as a black woman who was born in Baltimore. And that gave me a sense of having deep roots in a community that I felt very, very comfortable with. I'm not afraid to get out and uh, provide that community with the safety that it well deserved. So I was humbled by the experience, and I felt as if I served that community the best I could. And I always like to see more officers who have a love for the community, that they are equipped to have the authority of, detaining, just removing someone's freedom of movement. That's an awesome power. And I'm gonna tell you something. When you, yeah, when you are controlling someone's freedom of movement, spiritually, I don't know about anyone else, but spiritually it did something to me. And I want to make sure that no other recourse, and it was for everyone's safety, mine, the other person, what was taking place. So to discern and to be able to think fast on your feet and respect yourself and respect others, to me, that's what community policing. I was a detective in criminal investigation division. I was a detective in internal affairs, and I was also a community policing officer, and I was a uniform patrol officer. So I got a broad sense of what policing in a large urban setting should be and can be. So I don't think I was an anomaly. I just think that those type of attributes are no longer a priority, and we're getting the results of officers who are afraid of getting out of their cars, officers who do not know the community, you don't know the culture of a community, and to
Well,
give.
that actually brings me to my next question for you. Um, with the temperature the way it is in the streets right now, um, as a former law enforcement officer, how critical do you think community policing is, and how much do we need to fight for that to come back to our communities or come to our community? Because I don't think we've ever really had a solid community policing,
Well, there's a difference in community policing and policing the community.
Oh,
There is a distinction, okay? So
okay.
when we use the term community policing, we have to be very, very careful, because some people hear policing the community. And when you're policing a community, you are actually targeting a community. And when you target a community, all data and facts and stats go out the window, because though that information is no longer credible. I was of the mindset that, and when I was there was a quota of arrests, but I just dismissed that. My quota of how effective I was as a police officer determined how much less crime was on my post. Because when you have effective policing, there is no way crime can coexist in that space.
Right.
Okay.
Agree with
So therefore, I had less arrests because I was vigilant and being out in the street, out of my car. So you can't measure prevention per se. So by my presence being out in the community, and who knows, things were prevented. So my stats on my post, crime was down, but and my arrest was down. Does that mean no one on my post had any type of criminal? No, it just meant that it's like an omnipresence. So you can have an omnipresence where you are heavy-handed,
Mm.
where you want to oppress people, or you can have an omnipresence where what I call I deputize my community. And I'm going to give you to this day it puts a smile on my face. But just to give you an example, when I was in community policing, oftentimes on the for the 12th shift or the midnight shift, we did not have cars. So on this one evening, I was going to walk back to the station, and that was maybe about 2.5 miles. So I'm a police officer. I'm okay, right? I have things I can use. Well, it's about 12 o'clock at night, and I'm walking back to the station, and one of my residents saw me walking, and she said, "Officer Debbie, where are you going?" I said, "Well, couldn't get a ride back to the station. I'm gonna walk back to the station." And guess what she said to me? She says, "Officer Debbie, it is dangerous out here. You need not to be out here walking by yourself." And she literally came off her porch and walked me halfway. Now think about that. She did not see me as a police officer. She saw me as a woman walking midnight by myself. And when people talk about community trust, that is what community trust looks like. That's it. So how did I get to that point?
Well, actually, that's all we're asking for,
Yes,
technically. We
yes.
just want to be able to trust the officers that have sworn to protect us. And so when we see what's going on in the streets now, as far as demands for reform and what have you, what are your thoughts on what's going on with the protesting and the things that are the demands that we're making on police officers? And then
Well,
some of them are resigning because they don't feel like they have the support of I don't know, I guess their superiors or whatever, but we just want to be able to trust the officers.
well, I'm glad you brought that up about the officers who are calling out and not answering calls. Let's just say just perhaps, those are the bad apples people keep talking about. Okay? Because if you are committed to your profession and to keep a community safe, and so maybe these are officers who are calling themselves out. If I were a commanding officer, I would want to look at every officer who called out and not answering the call, because for me, that's very telling. Are you saying that you're the bad apple? You don't want to police in a way that's fair to people? Because that's my takeaway. That is my takeaway. So when we talk about all these bad apples or it's very minimal, I don't believe that's the case. So, and also when the community is talking about defunding the police, all they're really saying is to reallocate funds so they can see it. Because
Right.
oftentimes that budget includes services to that community. But if a community not seeing the results, doesn't it have the appearance, where's the money going? It's not coming here. So my take on officers calling them, not answering their call and not protecting the community is just my opinion, my estimation that these may be the officers that are not ready to police the way that the community has presently said, this is how we want to be policed. We want you to be fair. We want you to be treat us equal. And
Like
if you
humans.
can't do that, yeah. So if you can't do that, so why wouldn't you show up? Are you saying you can't do that? That's what I'm hearing.
That's
I mean, I'm just saying that's what it looks like to me. So we have just flushed out the bad apples.
Good. Well, Detective Ramsey, is there anything else that you would like to offer us that we can take away to our families and our communities and some
Yeah,
teachers, some things that we need to know?
yes. First and foremost, I'm here on behalf of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. We are a 501c3 organization, and that we are an organization. Uh, we have police officers, correctional officers, judges, prosecutors, and our sole purpose is for policing to be more just. And I would like to just end on this, how I started out. The first thing I said was love of community. If we cannot springboard off of that, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And also that when we talk about the police department, keep this in mind. The people are the police. Think about that. The people are the police, and the police should be the public and representative of the public. Uh, the funding that this is the phrase that I use. I don't believe in defunding the police. I believe in refunding the community. That's my catchphrase. We were out yesterday with our little placards on the corner of Gay and Fair downtown, right in front of police headquarters. Refund the community. Refund the community, because there are some questions about where this money is going. And the kids involved, I just want to end with this, if I have a couple more seconds to paint this picture, that here in Baltimore, we had a referendum that the citizens of Baltimore City voted to have $12 million to go directly to youth programs and out of school time programs. To this day, not one cent has been allocated, and this was like in 2016, 17. The money was, those funds were to be managed by another organization, and unfortunately, it was by our mayor, who's no longer the mayor. So all that money has been suspended. So when our young people see that they had just 12 million compared to 500 million, a $500 million that Baltimore spends for the police department. So our kids see the lopsided of that equation. And so by them being creative, we have what we call squeegee kids in Baltimore. They stand in the corner, wash the windshield with dirty water or whatever, but they're being very entrepreneurial and very creative. And that's what young people, that's what they do. So we have to show them, they're saying, show us that we are worthy, because budgets reflect what your priorities are. And when 12 million is still sitting on ice and 500 million is going to the police department, who does not see that as an imbalance of priorities? So our kids are smart. So I always like to leave on that note.
What is the name of the organization again?
Which organization?
The one you're speaking of.
UnifiedEfforts.org. Please.
No, the one you're talking about now. The one you just mentioned just now.
Oh, LEAP, the one that I'm a part of? Yes,
Yeah.
LEAP, Law Enforcement Action Partnership.
Okay.
I'm here, it's an invitation through them. I'm a member of LEAP. This is what we do. And
great, thank you so much for your time. We have another candidate. We appreciate you. I'm sorry, candidate, another panelist. We appreciate you so much for stopping by. Nothing more refreshing than hearing from actual law enforcement about all these things that we are facing today. So thank you so much. And you're the prettiest police officer I've ever seen too.
Stop. I'm a grandmama. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Stay safe.
Next up, we have Ms. Ashley Baker. Ashley, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Ashley. It was so great talking to you yesterday. We have about 5 minutes, and I just want to let you share some views about voting rights, gerrymandering in prisons, and other oppressive laws, which we all share those views, but we really don't understand the depth of the negative impact in our communities. So when you said that to me yesterday, it really made me just want to jump up and just, start looking into some of those things to find out how we can, bring some solutions. So please give us your thoughts on those things.
Okay, so well, the two issues that we talked about yesterday were disenfranchisement based on criminal conviction, and prison-based gerrymandering. And in order to approach these two issues, we have to be willing to be open and honest and have a genuine conversation about slavery, because that's where these things originate from. So we celebrated Juneteenth yesterday, and as we know, Lincoln freed the slaves in 1863. And then following that, we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Now, the 14th Amendment granted full citizenship rights to the freed slaves, including voting rights. The 15th Amendment prohibited the states from conditioning the right to vote on race. But what a majority of states did was that they enacted different laws and constitutional amendments to disenfranchise those newly freed slaves. So what they did was they implemented poll taxes, they implemented literacy tests, they implemented excessive residency requirements. They required property ownership as a requirement to vote. Now, all of those things have been eliminated, but disenfranchisement based on criminal conviction has not been eliminated. And that is an issue. And it dates back from slavery. So in 2016, over 6 million people in America were disenfranchised based on a criminal conviction. And you know, it's something that we have to be honest about, and that we have to have a genuine conversation about. And the second piece of that is prison-based gerrymandering. So, and I'm going to try to be very brief, but prison-based gerrymandering is really when you have a group of people that are convicted of crimes in a minority area, and then you have a prison that sits in a rural area, and you have those people that would usually be counted for redistricting purposes in the communities where they're from. They're now counted where the prison sits. And what that does is that conflates the population when it's time to do redistricting. So you have majority rural white communities that benefit from the mere presence of prisons and Black and brown bodies in those prisons. Mm-hmm. So just for instance, a state like New York, where African Americans represent 77% of all state prisoners, this practice of prison-based gerrymandering is extremely problematic. A large percentage of the prison population in New York comes from New York City, which is largely minority, Black and brown communities. And then those prisons that people that when they're convicted of crimes, they're sent to prisons in upstate New York, which are largely white, rural areas. 98% of the prisons in New York sit in white state Senate districts. So you see where that's an issue. And it all stems back from slavery. And when I was researching prison-based gerrymandering, it reminded me of the 3/5 compromise, where you had Black people counted for redistricting purposes during slavery in the antebellum period. So we have to first have a conversation and be honest about the effects of slavery and how they're still present today.
Our former Attorney General, Eric Holder, he's worked a long time on this gerrymandering and things like that. And so I think, we can find out what he's doing, see if we can get involved, get more information. But also I would like, if you don't mind, if you can send me an email or attach your statistical data to the email because my work is around prisons and helping people get their criminal records cleared and what have you. And so that information is very, very, very important. It's very necessary. I just hate we've run out of time. This is such an amazing conversation, but that actually concludes our portion of the town hall. And we hope it was informative and educational and that everyone has many takeaways to share with our families, our organizations, our communities. Thank you so much, Dr. Beasley, Detective Ramsey, and Ms. Ashley. Thank you so much. I'm your moderator for this segment. Nita Watson, Free Indeed Reentry Project is my organization. And